Every monument hides a story. Every stone whispers a past. Welcome to History Vault, where history comes alive. Hidden deep in the Black Hills of South Dakota, a mountain stares back at the world with eyes carved in stone. For colossal faces, born from dynamite and dreams, gaze across the centuries as if guarding the secrets of a nation. But behind their silent expressions lies a story of ambition and controversy, of vision and betrayal, where history and mystery intertwine. This is not just a monument. It is a riddle carved into granite, daring us to ask whose story it truly tells. In the heart of the Black Hills of South Dakota, a vision began to take shape that would ultimately etch itself into both stone and history. The idea of carving colossal faces into a mountain seems almost mythical, like something born out of legends rather than plans of architects and sculptors. Yet, behind this audacious creation lies a mixture of ambition, controversy, and an unshakable belief in the power of symbols. To truly understand Mount Rushmore, one must first return to its origins, when it was nothing more than a rugged granite peak, standing silently among forests and sacred lands. The Black Hills were not just random terrain chosen for a spectacle. Long before dynamite and drills echoed through the cliffs, these hills were revered by the Lakota Sioux as sacred ground, a place of spiritual importance, tied to their stories of origin and their ancestors. When the idea of carving a mountain was proposed, it was not only a grand artistic challenge, but also a cultural intrusion into a land deeply tied to Native American heritage. That tension still lingers like an echo, reminding us that the birth of Mount Rushmore was never just about stone and artistry. It was also about whose history would dominate the narrative. The man behind this audacious vision was Gutzon Borglum, a sculptor with a larger-than-life personality and ambitions to match. He was not content with crafting small statues or traditional memorials. He wanted something eternal, something so grand that it would outlast nations, wars, and even time itself. His dream was not just to create art, but to carve a symbol of American identity that would be recognized across the globe. Borglum saw in the granite face of Mount Rushmore the possibility of immortality, not just for the presidents he would carve, but for himself as well. But why here, in the remote wilderness of South Dakota? The idea first came from a local historian, Don Robinson, who believed that the Black Hills needed a monument to draw visitors, a creation so magnificent that people from across the nation would journey to see it. His original suggestion was to carve heroes of the American West, like Lewis and Clark or Buffalo Bill. Yet Borglum had grander ambitions. He dismissed the idea of regional figures and instead envisioned the faces of presidents, men he believed embodied the spirit, growth, and ideals of the United States. To him, this was not a monument to a region, but to a nation. Choosing the site was no easy task. Borglum searched the granite cliffs until his eyes landed on a massive peak rising above the trees, a mountain in Dakota called Six Grandfathers. Its south-facing slope would catch the sunlight perfectly, and the granite was strong enough to endure the assault of drills and explosives. With that decision, a sacred mountain would be transformed into a canvas of national identity. Mystery lies in the choice itself. Was it destiny that Borglum found this peak, or a symbolic act of rewriting the land's story into one that fit a different vision of history? The selection of the four presidents was equally symbolic. Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln were not chosen at random, but carefully selected to represent the birth, expansion, preservation, and progress of the nation. Each face was meant to embody an era, a chapter in the American story. Borglum wanted people to gaze upon the mountain and feel the sweep of history carved into its stone, a history told through towering visages. But beneath that patriotic symbolism lurked another reality. This was history told from a single perspective, one that ignored the voices and struggles of those who lived on this land long before the monument was conceived. Funding the project was as challenging as the vision itself. The 1920s roared with prosperity, but by the time work truly began, the Great Depression had struck, draining resources and forcing difficult choices. Yet, against all odds, the project continued, with money trickling in from federal sources, state funds, and private donations. Borglum lobbied tirelessly, convincing politicians and the public alike that this monument was not just art, but a legacy worth building. His determination carried the dream forward, even when the nation itself seemed on the verge of collapse. There is a mystery in the sheer audacity of it all. Imagine standing at the base of a mountain, looking up at solid granite, and believing that human hands had transformed it into something recognizable, something enduring. Borglum and his team believed it was possible, though no one had ever attempted anything on such a scale. The dream was not merely to sculpt stone, but to bend nature itself into a vision of national greatness. That belief in the impossible is what gives Mount Rushmore its almost mythical aura. It is a story of men daring to leave a mark not just on the earth, but on time. As the first plans were drawn and the initial drills echoed to the Black Hills, the stage was set for a transformation that would take years, risk lives, and stir controversy. The dream of Mount Rushmore was no longer just an idea. It was chiseling its way into reality, with every blast of dynamite and every stroke of the sculptor's hand bringing the vision closer to the mountain's surface. Yet the whispers of the past lingered, reminders that beneath the grand national story lay older stories, silenced but never forgotten. The origin of Mount Rushmore is not just a tale of ambition and artistry, but of competing histories, dreams, and the unrelenting pursuit of immortality through stone. It is a beginning steeped in both pride and controversy, a monument born out of mystery as much as history, destined to spark awe and debate for generations to come. When the decision was made to carve faces into the granite cliffs of the Black Hills, the real challenge had only just begun. To imagine colossal presidential faces staring out from solid stone was one thing, but to bring that vision into existence was a task bordering on the impossible. The mountain was unforgiving, its granite ancient and unyielding, and the tools of the early 20th century were crude compared to precision such a monument demanded. Yet against all odds, a team of determined men stood at the base of Mount Rushmore and dared to reshape it. Their story is one of danger, sacrifice, and resilience, a battle between human willpower and the timeless strength of the earth itself. At the heart of this endeavor was dynamite. The idea of sculpting with chisels alone was laughable in the face of 5,700-foot granite mountain. Instead, workers used carefully measured blasts of explosives to remove massive chunks of rock, sometimes in pieces weighing several tons. The sound of dynamite became the heartbeat of the mountain, echoing through the valleys as the granite slowly gave way. There is a strange mystery in the thought of nature, solid for millions of years, suddenly shattered by the decisions of men who believed they could control its shape. The dust clouds rising after each blast were like smoke signals announcing that history was being rewritten, one explosion at a time. Once the rough stone was blasted away, workers moved to the delicate task of refining the details. For this they used pneumatic drills, hanging in harnesses or standing on narrow scaffolds hundreds of feet above the ground. The danger was constant. There were no modern safety protocols, and every day the men risked their lives against rock slides, falling tools, and the ever-present possibility of losing their footing. And yet, miraculously, not a single life was lost during the years of construction. That fact alone adds to the aura of Mount Rushmore, as if the mountain itself permitted the transformation, sparing those who dared to shape it. The workers were not engineers or artists by trade. Many were miners and ordinary men seeking work during the harsh years of the Great Depression. For them, this was not just a job, but a lifeline, a way to support their families when opportunities were scarce. They toiled under the sun and in the biting cold of South Dakota winters, earning meager wages for backbreaking labor. Their names may not be remembered like Borglum's, but it was their sweat and courage that gave the monument its form. Behind every blast and every drilled line was a determination of men who believed they were part of something larger than themselves. Gutzon Borglum oversaw it all with unrelenting intensity. He was both admired and feared by the men, a visionary sculptor with a perfectionist streak that tolerated no mistakes. Borglum did not merely want faces carved. He demanded expressions, detail, and life in the stone. He insisted that the eyes be carved with depth, not just outlines, giving them a piercing gaze that could meet the eyes of generations to come. Even the pupils, carefully chiseled with a highlight of stone, were designed to catch light and seem alive. This attention to detail transformed Mount Rushmore from a colossal carving into something almost human, as if the mountain itself had awakened and taken form. Funding remained a constant struggle. The project began with lofty promises of private donations, but as the Great Depression deepened, contributions dwindled. Time and again, Borglum turned to government support, lobbying Washington, convincing senators and even presidents that this was not just a monument but a testament to national pride. Despite financial setbacks, despite political hesitation, the work pressed on. The monument itself seemed to embody the resilience of the nation it celebrated, rising slowly even as the country faced its darkest economic hours. As the faces began to emerge, visitors from around the country traveled to witness the progress. They stood in awe as fragments of stone that once seemed random now revealed familiar profiles. Washington's strong, steady gaze was the first to appear, followed by Jefferson, then Lincoln and Roosevelt. The mystery of creation itself was unfolding before their eyes. How could Mountain, once indistinguishable from the rest, suddenly hold the likeness of history's greatest leaders? It was as if stone and spirit had merged, capturing both the permanence of nature and the fleeting legacy of man. Yet, not everything went according to plan. Borglum originally envisioned the president's bodies carved down to their waists, surrounded by inscriptions that told the story of America. Time, money, and the sheer difficulty of the task forced compromises. The work remained unfinished, with only the faces completed. Behind Lincoln's head, a hidden chamber known as the Hall of Records was begun but never completed, adding a layer of mystery to the monument. Some claim it was meant to hold the story of America for future civilizations, a vault of history carved into the mountain. Though the chamber remains incomplete, the very idea suggests Borglum saw Mount Rushmore not just as a monument for the present, but as a message to the distant future. Every day the sun rose over the Black Hills and cast its light on the unfinished masterpiece, reminding workers of the enormity of their task. And every evening, as shadows stretched across the valley, the faces seemed to shift and change, alive with the fading glow of the day. To many, it must have felt like watching history being born in real time, as if granite had agreed to yield its secrets only to those willing to fight for them. By the time the final blasts and chisels were silenced, the mountain had been transformed forever. What once was raw wilderness now bore the mark of human vision and perseverance. Mount Rushmore had become more than a project, more than a monument. It was proof that determination, ingenuity, and faith in an idea could defy even the immovable permanence of stone. The carving of the giants was complete, but the story they told was just beginning. The mountain's transformation from raw granite to recognizable faces was more than just an engineering marvel. It was also an act of storytelling carved in stone. Each of the 4 presidents chosen from Mount Rushmore carried with them a narrative, a legacy that represented not only their own time, but also a broader vision of what America was meant to become. In selecting Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln, Borglum sought to compress centuries of history into a single mountain, to create a monument that would stand as both a shrine and a symbol. But why these 4? Why not others who shaped the nation? The mystery of selection reveals as much about Borglum's vision as it does about America itself. George Washington was the first to take form, fittingly so, for he symbolized the very birth of the nation. The chisel and dynamite etched into stone the stern yet steady gaze of man who led a fragile collection of colonies against one of the most powerful empires in the world. Washington's presence on the mountain was more than just a nod to the Revolution. It was an eternal reminder of beginnings. His face, commanding yet calm, was meant to inspire future generations to remember that the American experiment was born not out of certainty, but out of daring. Standing beneath his stony eyes, one cannot help but feel the weight of that gamble, the risk of creating a nation where none had existed before. Beside him, Thomas Jefferson's likeness emerged, his features sharp and intellectual, reflecting a mind that penned the Declaration of Independence and dreamed of a nation that could stretch from coast to coast. Jefferson was chosen to embody expansion, the idea that America was not confined to 13 colonies, but destined to grow, to push boundaries both geographic and ideological. His role in the Louisiana Purchase alone nearly doubled the young nation, setting the stage for continental dominance. Yet Jefferson's story is riddled with contradictions, his eloquent words on liberty juxtaposed with his own ties to slavery. In the stone of Mount Rushmore, however, Borglum chose to immortalize not the contradictions but the vision, the dream of a vast and thriving America. There's a quiet mystery in that choice, a selective memory that highlights ideals while softening complexities. Abraham Lincoln, carved with his furrowed brow and solemn expression, represented preservation. His face, lined with care, seemed to capture the burden of a man who carried the Union through its darkest trial. For Borglum, Lincoln was the embodiment of endurance, the leader who refused to let the nation fracture permanently. His visage gazes out from the granite with a gravity that mirrors the weight of his era, the Civil War, emancipation, and the redefinition of freedom itself. Lincoln's inclusion was not just symbolic. It was a deliberate reminder that the nation's survival was neither easy nor guaranteed. He carved into stone the idea that unity must be fought for, preserved against forces that would tear it apart. The most surprising choice to many was Theodore Roosevelt, whose likeness peers from the mountain with a rugged determination. Roosevelt was not a founding father, nor a Civil War leader, but a president of the modern era. His selection reflects progress, the idea of America as an emerging global power. Roosevelt championed conservation, building national parks to preserve the land's beauty, even as he pushed industrial expansion and the construction of the Panama Canal. His face on the mountain carries a forward-looking energy, a symbol of ambition and growth in the 20th century. Some question his place among the others, but Borglum believed Roosevelt represented a bridge between past ideals and future possibilities, embodying America's spirit of innovation and leadership on the world stage. Together, the four faces form a narrative arc: birth, expansion, preservation, and progress. This was Borglum's intention, to create not just a monument to individual men, but to the story of a nation. Yet this selection is not without controversy. Many have asked why figures like Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, or even more recent presidents were excluded. The truth is that Mount Rushmore reflects not an objective history, but Borglum's interpretation of what America stood for in his time. The monument is as much about the sculptor's vision as it is about the men it immortalizes. There is also a deeper mystery in how these stone faces, cold and immovable, manage to convey emotion and power. Washington's dignity, Jefferson's intellect, Lincoln's sorrow, and Roosevelt's determination, all carved into silent granite. The mountain speaks without words, reminding us that history is not just written in books, but etched into landscapes, shaping how future generations perceive the past. Yet behind the grandeur lies an unresolved truth. The land on which these faces stand was sacred to the Dakota Sioux, and the carving of American presidents onto it is seen by many as a symbol of conquest and erasure. To the Lakota, these were not heroes, but figures tied to a history of broken treaties and lost lands. Thus, Mount Rushmore carries two stories at once, one of national pride and another of cultural dispossession. The tension between those stories lingers, adding a layer of haunting complexity to the monument's meaning. As the sun moves across the sky and shadows play on the stone, the faces seem to change expression, as though the presidents themselves are alive within the granite. Visitors from around the world gaze upward and see more than likenesses. They see ideals, contradictions, triumphs, and struggles. The monument becomes a mirror, reflecting not just four men, but the broader question of what America has been and what it seeks to become. Mount Rushmore's four presidents are not merely carvings. They are symbols embedded in stone, representing a nation's selective memory. They inspire awe, they spark debate, and they remind us that history is never as simple as it seems. To stand beneath them is to feel the pull of both mystery and history, a reminder that the story of a country is always larger than the sum of its heroes. Beneath the grandeur of Mount Rushmore lies a story that is far less polished than the stone faces gazing outward. For all its glory and acclaim, the monument is also a site of unresolved conflict, deep controversy, and mysteries hidden behind the carefully chiseled features of the four presidents. To some, it is a celebration of freedom and democracy. To others, it is a scar on sacred land, a reminder of broken promises and the silenced voices of those who lived here long before a sculptor's tools ever touched the granite. The contradictions surrounding Mount Rushmore are what give it an enduring complexity, a monument that inspires both pride and protest. The Black Hills, where Mount Rushmore was carved, were not empty wilderness awaiting transformation. For the Lakota Sioux, this land was holy, a place they called Paha Sapa, the heart of everything that is. It was central to their spiritual life and culture, and they believed it had been granted to them in perpetuity under the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868. Yet, when gold was discovered in the region, the United States broke its promises, seizing the land and displacing the Sioux. When Borglum and his team began their work in the 1920s, the memory of that betrayal was still raw. For the Lakota, the carving of American presidents into their sacred mountains was not a tribute, but an insult, an act that celebrated the very figures in government responsible for their suffering. This unresolved tension still hangs over the monument, making it as much a symbol of loss as it is of pride. There is also the matter of Gutzon Borglum himself, a man whose ambitions were larger than life, but whose personal affiliations were troubling. Before Mount Rushmore, Borglum worked briefly on a Confederate memorial at Stone Mountain in Georgia, a project linked to the revival of the Ku Klux Klan. Though he left that project amid disputes, his association with it has cast a shadow over his later achievements. Critics argue that a man with such connections was not the ideal architect for a monument that claimed to embody freedom and democracy. His vision for Mount Rushmore, while brilliant, was also deeply tied to a narrative of America that excluded indigenous voices and glossed over uncomfortable truths. Adding to the intrigue are the secrets hidden within the mountain itself. Behind the face of Abraham Lincoln, Borglum began carving a massive chamber he called a Hall of Records. His vision was to create a grand vault, a hidden archive that would hold the nation's most important documents, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the story of America's history carved into tablets. To Borglum, this chamber was just as important as the faces outside, a way to speak to future civilizations who might one day stumble upon a mountain and wonder who these figures were. But funding ran out, and Borglum's death in 1941 left the chamber unfinished. Today, the Hall of Records exists only as a rough cavity sealed from the public, holding a few records and a sense of mystery about what might have been. Legends have grown around this hidden chamber. Some whisper of secret rooms and buried treasures, while others imagine a message left for future generations, waiting to be uncovered. Though much of it is speculation, the very existence of an unfinished secret hall within the mountain fuels fascination, giving Mount Rushmore an aura that stretches beyond the visible. It is not just what we see on the surface, but what remains hidden inside that keeps the monument shrouded in mystery. Beyond the chambers and politics, controversy also follows the very choice of the figures carved into the stone. To many Native Americans, the presidents symbolize conquest, broken treaties, and oppression. Washington, who represents independence to most Americans, is also remembered as a leader who ordered military campaigns against indigenous tribes. Jefferson, celebrated for expanding the nation, oversaw policies that encouraged westward expansion at the expense of native lands. Lincoln, though remembered as a great emancipator, approved the largest mass execution in U.S. history when 38 Dakota men were hanged in Minnesota. Roosevelt, praised for his progressive vision, often spoke of American expansion in terms that dismissed native cultures. To carve their faces into sacred mountains was, in the eyes of Lakota, a painful rewriting of history. This unresolved tension came to the surface in the 1970s when Native activists occupied the monument in protest, demanding the return of the Black Hills. Their protests, echoing to the carved stone, reminded the world that Mount Rushmore's story was not just about American pride, but also about stolen lands and cultural erasure. Even today, legal battles continue over the ownership of the Black Hills, and the monument remains at the center of heated debates about memory, justice, and whose history is truly being honored. At the same time, Mount Rushmore has become a global icon, a site where millions of visitors gather each year to marvel at its scale. This duality, admiration and protest, awe and anger, makes the monument unlike any other. It stands as both a tribute to human ambition and a reminder of its cost. The mystery lies in how a single mountain can carry such conflicting meanings, a beacon of democracy to some, a wound of conquest to others. When the sun sets and shadows stretch across the faces, it is easy to forget the controversies and simply marvel at the artistry. Yet the whispers of the past never vanish. The Lakota is still called the land heirs. Borglum's secret chamber still sits sealed within a mountain, and the monument itself continues to provoke questions about history and memory. Mount Rushmore is not just stone. It is a conversation carved into granite, a monument that forces us to confront both triumph and tragedy. Its controversies and hidden histories are what keep it alive in our imagination. It is not a finished story, but an ongoing one, a reminder that monuments are not static. They breathe with the weight of the past and the debates of the present. And in that tension lies its enduring mystery, a mountain that gazes outward even as it holds secrets deep within. Long after the final blast of dynamite echoed to the Black Hills and the last chisel struck the mountain, Mount Rushmore stood completed, its four colossal faces staring into eternity. Yet the story of this monument did not end with its construction. If anything, that was only the beginning. What makes Mount Rushmore enduring is not just the stone that forms it, but the meaning people attach to it. The way it has become a stage where history, identity, and controversy collide. It is more than a mountain carving. It is a symbol that continues to evolve, carrying with it both pride and paradox as generations pass beneath its gaze. The monument quickly became a magnet for visitors, drawing millions from across the United States and around the world. Families made pilgrimages to see the stone presidents, standing in awe at their sheer size. Tourism transformed the region, with hotels, roads, and attractions rising to accommodate the steady stream of travelers. What was once a remote peak known only to locals and the Dakota Sioux became one of the most recognized landmarks in America. For many, standing beneath the towering visages of Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln felt like standing in the presence of history itself. Yet this very transformation of the mountain into a tourist destination is a reminder of how human ambition reshapes landscapes, redefining sacred spaces into national icons. Mount Rushmore became more than just a place to visit. It became a symbol embedded in culture. Its image has been reproduced endlessly in films, television, political campaigns, and even satirical cartoons. It is often used as shorthand for the idea of greatness, for something monumental and enduring. But the mountain's presence in pop culture also strips it of some of its solemnity, turning a sacred landscape into a backdrop for entertainment. This dual role, sacred and commercial, profound and playful, captures attention of Mount Rushmore's place in the modern world. At its heart, the monument carries a message meant to transcend time. Borglum's vision was not just for his generation, but for the centuries to come. He wanted the stone faces to stand for thousands of years, a testament to the ideals of democracy and leadership. In his eyes, Mount Rushmore was America's gift to the future, a way of declaring to distant generations, "This is who we were. This is what we believed." The Hall of Records, though left unfinished, was part of that dream, a vault intended to preserve the story of the nation in case all else was lost. In this sense, the monument was designed as a message across time, bridging the present with an unknown future. But Mount Rushmore symbolism is never straightforward. For some, it embodies freedom, strength, and unity. For others, it is a painful reminder of displacement, a monument to conquest rather than liberty. The Dakota Sioux still view it as a desecration of sacred land, and their fight for recognition continues. The U.S. Supreme Court acknowledged in 1980 that the Black Hills were taken illegally, awarding compensation that the Sioux have refused, insisting instead that the land itself be returned. Mount Rushmore, in this light, is not just a tourist attraction, but a focal point of ongoing struggle, a reminder that history is written not only in granite, but in the lives of people whose voices were ignored. The monument also continues to spark debates about national identity. Some see it as a celebration of greatness, while others see it as an example of selective memory, highlighting certain figures while ignoring others who shaped the nation in profound ways. In a diverse and changing America, questions arise. If Mount Rushmore were built today, would the same four faces be chosen? Or would new leaders and voices join them on the mountain? These questions keep the monument alive as a topic of reflection, proving that its meaning is not fixed, but constantly shifting with the nation it represents. There is also the mystery of endurance. Will the stone faces survive the passage of time? Geologists believe the granite will withstand erosion for thousands of years, but nature is patient and relentless. Wind, rain, and frost will eventually wear down the carvings. Someday, perhaps far in the future, the details of the president's faces may fade into rough outlines, then vanish altogether. When that happens, what will remain is not the stone itself, but the stories we attach to it, the myths and memories carried forward. In this sense, Mount Rushmore exists not just on a mountain, but in the minds of all who behold it. Every evening, as lights illuminate the mountain, and the stone faces glow against the darkening sky, visitors are reminded that this monument is more than rock. It is an idea, a reflection of ambition, contradiction, and legacy. The presidents stare outward, their expressions frozen, but the meaning of their presence changes with each generation that looks up at them. For some, they are heroes. For others, they are reminders of unfinished struggles. For all, they are symbols carved into the very earth, daring us to question what it means to be remembered. Mount Rushmore has become timeless not because the stone is unchanging, but because it continues to provoke thought and debate. It is both a masterpiece and a controversy, a wonder and a wound. Its permanence is deceptive, for the meaning of the monument shifts like the shadows that crawl across its surface. And perhaps that is what makes it so powerful. It forces us to wrestle with history, to confront both the pride and the pain of the past. In the end, Mount Rushmore is less about the four faces on the mountain and more about the story they tell. It is a story of ambition and artistry, of conquest and controversy, of legacy and loss. It is a monument beyond time, one that will endure not only as stone in the Black Hills, but as a mirror reflecting the soul of a nation, its triumphs, its contradictions, and its endless struggle to define what it truly stands for. As the sun sets over the Black Hills and shadows creep across the stone, Mount Rushmore remains both a triumph and a question mark. It is a monument that unites and divides, inspires and unsettles, standing as both a symbol of greatness and a reminder of struggles unresolved. The presidents stare outward, frozen in time, but the meaning of their presence shifts with every generation that looks up at them. In their silence, they ask us not just to remember the past, but to confront it, and to decide what legacy we will carve into history's stone. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to History Vault, your gateway to the past.